You have the potential to take an action or give a gift that will change somebody's life. Don't snooze your dreams, Michelle Weger. You're listening to AMI Audiobook Review on AMI Audio. I'm Jacob Szymanski. Let me read to you a synopsis right off the top. You have big dreams, yet obstacles, fears, and even your own body might be holding you back. It's overwhelming, and it's far less scary to hit the snooze button, roll back over, and carry on living life as you know it. But your fear is what's really holding you back, and you can overcome it. Living with narcolepsy and cataplexy, Michelle Weger knows this struggle all too well. But she turned her toughest experiences into fuel to power her success. Don't Snooze Your Dreams is not only a memoir, but also a powerful self-help guide for anyone facing obstacles in life. With humor, heart, and hard-earned wisdom, Weger takes you on her extraordinary journey from managing a rare debilitating sleep disorder to launching a successful business and becoming an advocate for narcolepsy awareness. But this book isn't just for people with narcolepsy or with a disability. Michelle's insight go far beyond her personal experience. Her lovable Great Dane serves as her amazing guide dog, service dog, her constant companion, reminding readers that help comes in many ways. That's the synopsis of Don't Snooze Your Dreams, Lessons from Life with Narcolepsy by Michelle Weger. We have a clip from the audiobook. Here it is for you.
During the regular school year, I chose my classes exclusively based on the time of day. No matter how interesting a class seemed, if it started before noon, it was off the table. Was I riveted by the history of Greece in the 5th century BC? No, but if it started at 1 p.m., I would seriously consider taking it. This approach was definitely unconventional, but it worked for me. I was able to do well and complete my degree. In fact, I finished my program in 3 years instead of the usual 4. Despite having switched degree programs because I was failing, I ended up surpassing where I would have been if I had stayed on the traditional path. All because I looked for a way to make things work for my situation.
That was a clip from Don't Snooze Your Dreams by Michelle Weger. The audiobook is exactly 4 hours long, in case you were curious. With me today is the author herself, Michelle Weger. Michelle, thank you so much for making time.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Of course. Let's start by getting your input on the synopsis I just read, because I'd like to hear what this book is to you. How would you describe your book?
This book is part memoir, part self-help, but not the gross, condescending kind that's meant to make you feel bad, right?
Yeah.
But the empowering kind. The kind you actually want to read. It is written to be very conversational. I actually wrote most of it by speaking into a voice app and using that as a way to write notes so that my spirit and the way I intend for stories to be communicated is actually how they ended up. Because I found if I sat and wrote, I would go back to the very traditional school typewriting rather than the more fun conversational.
And this is a lot of storytelling from
Yes.
your time coming to terms with narcolepsy. And why don't you give us a brief description of how narcolepsy affected your life? Because it's a big part of this book.
Absolutely. So narcolepsy affects approximately 1 in 2,000 people, and it's a sleep-wake disorder. Above all else for me, the way it affects me is that I will never feel non-tired. Every day of my life, I feel as tired as if a non-narcoleptic person has stayed awake for 48 hours. Yeah. And after that, you have to go about your normal life. You don't get to just go to bed after the 48 hours. You have to go to your job. You have to take care of your kids. You have to do the laundry, all the normal stuff at that level of exhaustion.
So this book is half memoir and half self-help, but it's all coming from your experiences of how you started to adapt after you got your diagnosis of narcolepsy.
Yeah.
So what were your first steps in doing that, adapting to narcolepsy?
Well, after I got through the initial sadness of the diagnosis, despite having waited 5 years to figure out what was going on that was making me fall asleep in public, I was actually very sad at first because I found out that what I had is there's no cure. There are treatments, but I will never be normal, whatever that word even means, really. And that the dreams I'd had for myself, which was to be a neurosurgeon or a pilot, were realistically off the table. You know, I'm a stubborn person. I believe you can make workarounds for almost anything, but those two might be a bit too dangerous.
I'm curious, like, who or what was it that spurred you on to write this book? Because it's doing a lot of things at the same time. It's a memoir and a self-help book to help you overcome fear. And I feel like there's a story behind why you chose to sit down and write it or speak it.
Yes, you know me well already. I had been told for about 5 years that I should write a book. And I kept putting it off because I wanted to make sure that it would be impactful for people and that it would help them, not just be the Michelle story and nothing else. And what I kept being told time and time again by people is how they were amazed how brave I was and how I did hard things and how they wished they could do that too. And when I sat with those concepts, I realized that I wasn't born that way. I wasn't, I had a great upbringing, but it's not what made me this brave. My sibling isn't like this. And that's where the reflection began of what are the things that I've done day to day since getting my diagnosis that have led to me feeling so confident in my ability to do just about anything, even if it's something very hard. And that's where the steps of the DREAM method, as I call it, DREAM, came to be, which is the self-help part of the book. The 5 steps I use to overcome anything that I'm afraid of that's stopping me from moving forward towards a dream.
Now, DREAM is an acronym. What does it stand for?
It is diagnose, role model, escalate, ally, and memorialize.
A huge part of this book is fear and the bravery it takes to overcome it. What are we scared of more often than not?
More than anything, humans are afraid of being rejected by other humans. We're afraid of doing something that we'll be embarrassed by, and that because we're embarrassed, we'll be rejected. And that is the greatest fear, even more than death or loss of money or getting sick. Across people in general, at the end of the day, they're afraid of rejection.
So now let's combine those two things. Something that you feared and the DREAM method. Can you give us an example of something that's in this book that it was something in your life that you were afraid of? Yeah. And that you use the DREAM method to overcome it?
Absolutely. So even being here with you today, I was very afraid of doing videos, particularly ones that were live like this is, where we can't reshoot this if I make a mistake. I was afraid, what if I stumble over my words? Or what if I say something embarrassing? Or what if I'm boring? I was so afraid of doing anything on videos. But it went down just like most social fears. I was afraid of rejection. And so I started by finding other people that were doing videos on social media, but not those top level influencers, people like me, people just a few steps ahead of me, because it gave me an example of what was possible for me if I put in a little work. And that's the diagnosed part, followed by role model. Then escalate. I had to find small actions I could do and stick to that would allow me to practice and work through the fear. Nobody's perfect or even very good the first time they do something. And understanding that is key to working through the fear. We're often afraid of not being good enough because of perfectionism. But the reality is nobody is good enough the first few times. So I started by making a live video on Facebook every single day. And I cried the first 3 days because I was so nervous about doing it. Yeah. But after a couple months, I could grab my phone and start at any time, any place, any topic, because I'd practiced again and again and again, which is the escalate part. Small actions adding up over time.
And there's a bit of a structure in your book where you go chronologically during when you were younger, before your diagnosis and the challenges that came with it and some of the solutions you found to manage your narcolepsy, and then after your diagnosis and how you discovered that a service dog could be useful for you, and then getting a professionally trained service dog. There's a formula to it because you point out a problem, a fear, and how you came through it. And after each one, you include a reflection, a key takeaway, I think is what you call it, and then a question, sometimes multiple questions for the readers.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? Include the takeaways and questions. I've never seen that before.
Thank you. That was a suggestion from my mentor. Her name is Lisa Larder, and she'd produced a couple of books herself. And she is one of my allies, which is a person who supports your dreams and steps in to give you advice, guidance, and support when you need it. And when I showed her the draft of one of the chapters, she suggested that I add that as a way to have people have an easy opportunity to pause and reflect about what was written and to apply it to their own life if they wanted to. Because the way the book is written is very bingeable. A lot of the reviews say that they read it or listened to it in only a day, back to back. And so adding those moments, those opportunities for reflection for those who wanted it was her idea. And I am one who listens to experts. So I added it right in.
Is that something you wanted when you were writing this book, hoping that your readers would read it with the intention of reflecting back on their own fears and how they can manage it?
Absolutely. One of the things that makes me happiest is when I get messages from people who have read the book and they're already taking an action. And some of those actions have been huge, and some of them are as simple as doing something that for most people would be not scary at all, but for the individual has been blocking them. There was one person who reached out who hasn't left her house for the last year because she's afraid. Her vision is declining and she's afraid of something going wrong. And after listening to the book the same day, she called a friend to ask if they could walk around the block together. And such a small thing, but it was the biggest
steps,
thing.
Right? That's the first step. And then eventually you can do it with the friend kind of trailing you behind while they make sure you stay safe, or just to give you comfort in knowing that somebody is watching you. And then you go around the block by yourself. Maybe you get lost, you call them on your cell phone and they'll come and save you. The next time you go around the block successfully, and boom, now you know how to get around the block by yourself. It's small steps, but you need to start by doing the first one. And it's so cliche, but sometimes you need personal anecdotes of people doing that to really let it sink in, which is what you do during the entire book. It's all problems and solutions.
Yeah. All real life stories, things that I did that I'm proud of, things that I did that I wish I hadn't, and all of them explained with the vulnerability and honesty that I think is key to good storytelling.
Can I make an assumption? Tell me. Feel that this book in a way was part of your process for getting over certain fears and to solidify everything that you've learned over the years. Was this book part of your healing and rehabilitation process?
That's a beautiful question. Initially it wasn't meant to be. What it ended up for me being, as the process went along, it was a great example of the M step, memorialize. Because I was reflecting on so much of what has happened over the last 12 years, it allowed me to have continuous, deep moments of, wow, look how much things have changed. Look at, I used to be here and now I'm here. Imagine what another 10 years of me following this same method is going to do. I'm only 33 at this point, and the potential of what could happen next was both a little scary, to be honest, if I think of all that's changed in the last 10 years, going from worrying I would live in my mom's basement unemployed for my entire life to now literally flying across the country to speak on different stages about overcoming fear and resiliency. It's a completely different life.
So memorializing is the M in the dream method. Remind me of D, R, E, and A again.
Diagnose, role model, escalate, ally, memorialize.
Now, all of the first four are pretty self-explanatory. It's the fifth one, memorialize, that I'd like some elaboration on. Why is it important to memorialize and take a look back? Because that's what this book is for you.
It is. It is. So especially as adults, we don't get a lot of rewards from the outside world. If you think about, if your boss wants to have you come to their office to talk about something, it's probably not going to be so they can give you a good job ribbon. It's probably going to be something bad, right? And because we don't do that for other people, we must do it for ourselves. So an example that I do that is so easy is the next time you get a text message or an email or any sort of communication from someone who says something good about you or to you, take a screenshot of it and then print it and save that physical paper. Because the screenshot is one thing. Now it lives on your phone with the other 17,000 photos of your dog, or maybe that's just me, but it's the physicalness of it that is so powerful. Because anytime you're feeling scared or you're not sure if you really can do what you're reaching towards, you go to that place where the physical papers are. And whether you look at them, touch them, read them, or just remember they're there, it's a physical memento of the fact that you are someone who's capable of doing hard things. Physical proof that you've done it before.
And so in times where you're doubting yourself, you have that physical proof that you've come out ahead in previous times that you had challenges. You got through it, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's if you're solving a crime, you look at the evidence, and it's the exact same thing. It's the evidence that the fear that's trying to hold you back is wrong.
What was your favorite part of this book to write? And what was your favorite part to read back?
Oh, goodness. I love your questions, Jacob. My favorite to write once it was written, but the one I put off until the last day, was the chapter about how my current service dog learned from my previous service dog, how she used him as a role model of what good narcolepsy Great Dane service dogs do, because she could follow his example. And it's one of the most beautiful things that has happened for me, because she was able to start working at only 6 months old, while for him, it was 3 years of training before he could work in public.
Wow.
But the end of the story is that he stopped working after that last day that I talk about in the book. And so it was a good thing I was using a computer to write that one, because I couldn't do that one via voice because I kept crying too much. And it was, that was an example of one that was very cathartic, because that first Great Dane service dog, Maximus, he was my soul dog, the once in a lifetime dog. And so getting to share his story was extremely meaningful. And then on the flip side, reading it back, there's only 2 chapters about dogs, but both of them are my favorites. So when reading it back and listening to the audiobook, I actually asked the voice actors, even though traditionally you have them read only the synopsis and the cover of the book, I asked them to read 1 page from the chapter where I talk about when I first got my first dog, who became that service dog. But from the beginning, he was just a out of control rescue dog that I probably shouldn't have gotten. And the stories that at the beginning of the fear and the mistakes and the learning that we did together, because there's a lot of funny lines in that story.
The most fascinating thing about that story about Maximus, your first service dog, was that it kind of happened accidentally, where you just discovered that this dog was very in tune with you and how your narcolepsy affects you. And I'm curious about that. How do you work with your service dogs to manage your narcolepsy?
So for those who can't see the live video feed, we just had an example of that as you asked the question. So Quinn, my current service dog, even though she's not wearing a vest right now, since we're at home, she just came over and sniffed me. She just gave me a check to see if I was awake enough. And because we were good to go, she moved on and now she's off to hang out with my husband for a bit more. So that is one of the things where she comes and sniffs. She's back again. And if she were to detect that I was getting too sleepy, she would alert for me to take medication. And that medication takes about 15 minutes to fully kick in. And if I take it when she alerts, pretty much at the same moment that it's kicking in fully and my heart's beating fast and I definitely feel awake, I also feel that heaviness of the sleepiness hitting at the same time. And so she has such impeccable timing that I have not fallen asleep in public since having Quinn.
Wow. And there's basically no medical device that could do that, right? But you also get the bonus that it's an adorable service dog that you have around with you all the time.
Right? She's cute and does a great job.
So how does she alert you? You said she comes and sniffs you. If she sees that you're falling asleep, what does she do?
She'll put her paw on my foot at first. And in some environments, that's obvious, like at home. But in a louder environment or one where my feet are not accessible to her, like if there was a table or something in the way, she'll put her paw on my lap. If I don't pretty quickly take the medication, she starts to amp up and will hop up and down a little bit, just a few inches off the floor. But as a Great Dane, she is 140 pounds. So even a little hop is a big motion. And I then listen for sure, because only twice have I ever not been able to, in that moment, listen. One time we were in airport security and my bag was going through the machine. So I told her we had to wait, but she actually put her paws on my shoulders and looked me straight in the eyes and made it very clear that I needed to sit down on the floor right now and get that medication, which I did.
Because you were about to pass out right then and there.
Yeah. So she was very insistent for safety.
5 minutes left.
Takes her job very seriously, doesn't she?
She does. She's a great worker.
The thing with narcolepsy and other conditions like it is that it's an invisible disability. And this is something that we talk about on AMI Audio often, is the unique challenges of having an invisible disability. Because I'm blind. When I walk around, I have a cane. People don't ask questions. That guy's blind. I get it. For you, they don't really know what you have. How do you handle that?
It was harder in the early days. The comments would get to me a lot more hurtful when I first had a service dog. And because I look normal, people assumed that either the service dog wasn't real or that I had anxiety, or sometimes, particularly in the United States when we travel, people would come up to me and say, "Thank you for your service." They assumed I was military and it was a PTSD dog.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So in each of those scenarios, it was a bit uncomfortable because I don't represent those groups and I don't want to say or do anything that could affect a group that I'm not a part of. So I ended up adding embroidery to Max's and then Quinn's vests that say narcolepsy. It's not something that's required. It's something that I personally wanted to do so that it would allow people who chose to look a bit longer an opportunity to know what it was. And potentially, so far it's happened twice, someone who has narcolepsy or knows someone with narcolepsy now can know that service dogs for narcolepsy exist and that what I've done could be a possibility for them as well.
And part of what you've done to achieve that goal is write this book. And to bring it back to the book, if you had to be succinct about it, like ultimately, what do you want readers to take away from this?
That they can do anything they want, that everyone has something hard in their life, whether it's a disability or a bad childhood, a divorce, they're a caregiver, everyone has something. And whatever excuse is holding you back, it doesn't need to.
Where can people find the audiobook if they're interested?
So it should be available on Audible very soon. But in the meantime, on my website, which is michelleweger.com, there is a downloadable version of the audiobook that is available. And all of the paper copies of the book have a QR code inside them where you can get that downloadable version for free. So if you buy the paper book, you get the audiobook for free as well.
Very cool. Well, there you go. Michelle, thank you so much for coming on. Your book was fantastic. If I can give a mini review right now, I went into it being slightly skeptical because I'm always skeptical about self-help books. I'm not going to be shy about it. It was very tastefully done. And there's something about the addition of those key takeaways and questions that made it so much more engaging for me. I was almost looking forward to hearing those every time we got to that point. And it was very digestible, very bingeable, as you mentioned it. Highly recommend it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
That was Michelle Weger. She's the author of Don't Snooze Your Dreams. That's all the time we have for this edition of AMI Audiobook Review. You can find a repeat of AMI Audiobook Review as part of AMI Today on AMI Audio every 6 hours. The show is also available on your favorite podcast platforms, and that includes YouTube. Thanks for joining us on AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski. Have a good one.